founders of Punchbowl News. We are thrilled to have you joining us for such an important conversation, our summit on youth mental health. A big thank you to the Coalition to Empower Our Future for partnering with Punchbowl News to make programming like this available. Today, I'm going to be sitting down with Representatives Tony Gonzalez, the Republican from Texas, and Adriana Salinas, the Democrat from Oregon, the two co-chairs of the Mental Health Caucus, two people that are very steeped in these issues. We're going to be talking news of the day, there's no shortage of that, as well as the specifics about what's happening in youth mental health, Congress's role, what more can be done. Afterwards, I'm going to be sitting down with former Florida Congressman Carlos Curbelo, the chair of the Coalition to Empower Our Future, for a fireside chat. And then after that, my colleague David Clark, our policy editor at Punchbowl News, will be sitting down with an expert panel to break down what they heard in both of those prior conversations, as well as their experience on the ground and what's happening in youth mental health today. We hope you do stick around afterwards. We've got plenty of coffee and drinks and food to network with advocates, staffers, and others who are in this space, get to know each other better to try to make a difference here on this important issue. As always, you can find Punchbowl News at all social media. At Punchbowl News, we encourage you to share interesting points in the conversation today through those channels as much as possible. You can find us at Punchbowl News. And with that, I'd like to welcome mental health co-chairs Tony Gonzalez and Adriana Salinas. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Congressman Salinas, thank you so much. Andrea, I know, I apologize. I was thinking it. Sometimes my Midwestern accent gets the better of me. Well, thank you both so much for joining us this morning. Let's talk a little bit news of the day. The government mostly opened. We are still working or hearing about what's going to happen on the DHS bill. But Congressman Gonzalez, I'm going to go to you first. Texas, border state, obviously immigration, a huge issue. There's some question about where Republicans are going to come down on some of the Democratic demands, I would say, right? Whether it's, you know, kind of having ICE and CPB officers not wear masks, judicial warrant requirements. Is there anything that Republicans can give or that you think are necessary maybe in terms of kind of bringing down some of the temperature right now?
Yeah, I'm encouraged to see the administration make some shifts already and some very needed reinforcement of trust for the community. The body cameras in Minnesota was a welcoming response. I think lots of law enforcement officers that I've spoken with have no problems with body cameras, and oftentimes they reiterate whatever they saw, whatever they went through, not just that one clip in time that gets kind of spread around. The mask, I think that one's probably going to be a sticking point. I would say Republicans are very united on not getting away with that, for the main reason you're seeing more and more law enforcement officers get doxxed. And imagine you're not in charge of policy, but you're being held responsible for the actions that are taking place. But they're not just worried about the job you're doing, they're attacking you at home, or they're attacking your family, those type of things. So that Republicans are very concerned with that. And then as far as the legal administrative warrants, I don't see Republicans giving any leeway on that, because you go down a slippery slope where all of a sudden you're making it harder for law enforcement to go out and do its job. What I do think the number one issue that I think we can agree on, and we can find some common ground, and I pushed this for a long time, is if we can focus on convicted criminal illegal aliens in our jails. There's over 3,000 jails in the country, and so imagine if you were conducting these raids at a jail instead of a raid in a neighborhood. That it's a controlled environment. You've got somebody that's already had their due process. They're already convicted locally, and I think there's a lot of common ground there.
Some Democrats, I think, would argue, don't see that the same way you do. Certainly, we've seen that in Minneapolis. But talk about this. I mean, 9 days, right? I was on the podcast this morning with Jake Sherman. He was very bearish, to say the least, that there's going to be some kind of agreement. Do you think we're going to need another continuing resolution, or the DHS just maybe doesn't get funded?
I think historically, 9 days is not a lot of time to get anything done in this town. But I also know if you wait 9 days, you're not going to get anything done. We probably will need some more time, but hopefully we can sit down. I mean, to be frank, this agreement was already hashed out. We passed the bill in the House in a bipartisan manner. If things hadn't happened more recently, I think this would have easily had passed through. So I don't know if 9 days is going to be enough to get everyone to kind of get in their corners and get back to yes. But it is an important issue because, everyone talks about DHS and we talk about ICE and we talk about the enforcement stuff, but we need to be talking about CISA. We need to be talking about making sure that our computer infrastructure, our digital infrastructure is secure. We need to be talking about FEMA with all the different natural disasters that are happening. The Coast Guard, the Coast Guard is literally the tip end of the spear right now with all the operations it's doing outside of Venezuela and other areas, not to mention the operations they're doing inside. So there's so much more to DHS other than ICE and ERO.
Congressman Salinas, Oregon, you also have faced some of these same challenges when it comes to ICE, when it comes to enforcement. This agreement was really between the White House and the Senate. I know that we've seen some frustration among Democrats. Where do you stand on this issue? Are there things that you say, this is the red line, if it doesn't have no masks, I can't vote for it?
Yeah, so I actually just dropped a bill with Senator Merkley. We were both working on this idea around these warrantless arrests and, lack of due process. That is unconstitutional and un-American. And I know my communities and communities across the United States are finally seeing it firsthand. If someone can get murdered, if two people can get murdered on the streets of Minneapolis, what are we doing wrong? How are we flouting the Constitution? And so this is one area where actually administrative warrants have never been the thing. When Immigration and Naturalization Services was an agency under the Department of Justice, they had stronger oversight, stronger compliance. Now it feels like a free-for-all. Americans understand that an administrative warrant is not the same as a judicial warrant. You can't just knock down somebody's door. You can't just rip off or break somebody's window when they're in their car. You have to be able to have reason and just cause to go after someone. And the data sets that the government is getting right now are blanketed, and they're blanketing communities, not individuals. I would be so happy if we were targeting criminals. President Trump and I ran on the same thing. Let's keep our borders secure. Let's make sure people are not bringing fentanyl into my communities. My community is being ravaged right now by drugs. I want that out. My community wants it out too, but we also want to feel safe from the very government that is supposed to protect us.
All right, so we just were hearing from the congressman that the challenges of 9 days, right? Democrats wanted to keep that window really short, right? To keep the pressure on, to try to find a pathway forward. How optimistic are you that there's not going to be another lapse in funding, or there won't be a lapse in funding, or you won't need another CR to try to continue that negotiation?
I'm not confident, honestly. I think it's going to be very hard, especially as President Trump continues to double down. He says one thing, but ICE behaves in another way, and we're continuing to see it. I know I went out actually with an ICE verifier 5:30 to 7:30 in the morning on Martin Luther King Jr. Day. I was back home, and I said, I want to actually see what you all do. I want to understand the process that you go through to be an observer. What are you trained? How are you training people from your side? It was very quiet. We did not see any ICE agents out, but we were looking up license plate numbers to verify to see who was out on the street and that sort of thing. But if we cannot have an agency that actually follows the Constitution, those same agents, Kristi Noem took an oath to the same Constitution that Congressman Gonzalez and I did, then what are we doing? As Americans, we have to follow the law. And this agency is supposed to be the enforcer of laws. They are breaking laws. They are breaking the constitutional rights of Americans across the United States. And we have to have oversight and make sure that they're in check.
All right, we could talk just about this, but I do want to make sure we get to the topic of the day, youth mental health. So this is not, obviously there's a lot of things that Republicans and Democrats right now do not agree on. You are both co-chairs of the Mental Health Caucus. This is not a partisan issue. I want to go to both of you on this question. How do you think about the many different factors that go into youth mental health? I think because sometimes we think just digital, sometimes we think it's loneliness, sometimes we think it's communities. How do you think about kind of the universe as a whole as we kind of set the stage for this conversation?
Yeah, you got to look at it. When you think about youth mental health, I have 6 children. The joke I like to say is I really am Catholic. You look at it, all my youngest is 5 years old, my oldest is 25 years old. That's a very big gap. And the way that they grew up or are growing up is very different. It's very different than how I grew up. But for youth in particular, they cannot get away from their screens. I mean, we can't get away from our screens. But imagine seeing all this information, all these really heavy conversations that we're having in our country. But imagine being 10 years old and trying to process that. And then all of a sudden you're sad, you're angry, you're happy, you're going through all these emotions. Not to mention, you have Instagram and you have all these other things where you're a kid and these things that are happening in your school, you never get away from it. You never get to take a break. You never get to put things aside and go out and play or just be away from the realness of life. But you're taking that on at 12 years old. We're at a point where our youth they're way behind. And if we don't do something about it, something terrible is going to continue to happen. They're screaming at the rooftops with all the different violence in our schools, with all the different the challenges that are happening with the mental health crisis. And oh, by the way, not everyone is going to shoot up a school. Not everyone is going to take their life. Not everyone is going to do something tragic. But a lot of us are going to go through anxiety. We're going to go through depression. We're going to go through anger issues. But imagine doing that at 10 years old, 15 years old. This is an area where I think Congress really needs to step up. It's easy for us to get sidetracked with the other important issues in our country, but to me, this is the area that impacts every aspect of people, every aspect, every community, large, small, and this is something we don't need to just be talking about it, we need real action.
Congresswoman?
Thank you. Thank you for saying all of that, and I couldn't agree more. This really is also a nonpartisan issue. I think I always say to folks back home, doesn't matter if you're in a red state, blue state, independent, non-affiliated, everybody is feeling this. When we know that 1 in 5 kids, 12 to 17 years old, have had a mental health or depressive episode, and of that group, probably about 20% have considered suicide, the kids are not okay. And this is going to take a kind of a whole entire country approach. And for me, that means infrastructure, actual facilities and residential treatment facilities that can care for our kids who need longer term care. It means additional providers. It means meeting them where they are, which is typically in schools. It means giving parents the infrastructure and the tools to understand how best to deal with kids. As Congressman Gonzalez just said, it's very different than when I grew up, even than when my 21-year-old daughter grew up and she had her first phone at, in 6th grade, and who knew back then how much bullying she would endure on that phone. So there are so many different levels that we need to address right now, and none of them are sufficient to meet the kids' needs.
Talk about policies, right? Because I think one of the questions we often hear, there's a lot of public-private partnerships, there's a lot of folks that are just impacted in their daily life, right? It's like one of those, I think it's one of those policy issues where you don't have to, everyone understands it's a challenge, right? I mean, you both kind of articulated that in such a clear way. But what role should Congress have? Are there policies that you think could actually move forward this Congress or into the next?
Yeah, one of the things that I really appreciate and have looked at more is government cannot solve everything. No matter how big the check is, no matter how much we do, you have to look for partners. If we're truly going to make this a whole of community approach, you need community leaders, not just writing a check. And so one of those community leaders that I've worked with personally over the last several years is Matthew McConaughey and Camilla McConaughey with the Greenlight Grants Initiative.
Just an average couple,
Yeah. Exactly. They're a great team. They're really passionate about it. And in today's environment, you need that star power to basically go and wait, what is this? And for them to make that a priority, I thought is really important. And what it does is it bridges those divides where government, isn't in these communities. And once again, it's like sometimes it's just a lot of times it's just sitting down with our kids and going, we love you. For whatever you are, whatever you want to do, we love you, we care about you, you're important to us. We want to make sure that you're successful in life. Whether you're wealthy, whether you're in poverty, it doesn't matter. Like, we love you. And organizations like that, that's exactly what they do. I think we need more of them. I think we need more people to know that these organizations exist and they're doing good work. And that's the area that we go, this works. We do it, we find it what works in our local community, and then how do we scale it up to really make it impactful nationwide.
Congresswoman Salinas, I mean, in addition to some of those public-private partnerships or the nonprofits that are out there, what kind of are there, I know we have some legislation that you've been working on, but are there some areas where you think Congress does play a role?
Oh, 100%. I mean, you know, when President Trump and Elon Musk came in and they started slashing SAMHSA through DOGE, it was really devastating. I mean, we saw the 988 Press 3 LGBT youth helpline cut. We saw a lot of the addiction and recovery dollars cut from SAMHSA. And so if you don't have the star power, like, you know, Matthew McConaughey, I have a group in my district, it's called Tualatin Together, and they really address prevention for addiction and recovery for youth who are already there, who are already self-medicating. But they take a prevention angle, and their grant comes through SAMHSA, right? So there are actually state and federal dollars that are being funneled into local communities and doing really good work. Right now, we know that too many kids are ending up in our emergency rooms because there aren't those residential treatment facilities that I mentioned earlier. That is a place where government actually, with just some authorizing language, right now they're limited to 16 beds. We could increase that to 32 beds, right? We don't, and I think there would actually be investment for those buildings that are already at 16 beds for folks to come in. We need that authorizing language. We need, I think, some clear definitions around what peer support services look like, especially for youth, and how those who have lived experiences, so other teens, other people who have had mental trauma, can help youth. But we need some structure, and a lot of times it is just the rules around it. It doesn't necessarily take money.
Super interesting. You know, we're in Washington, so oftentimes there's the experts, there's the adults who are telling us what's happening. But you all went to a youth mental health roundtable, and you heard from middle school to college students. What was the message? What did you hear? What stood out to you when it comes from the people who are really the youth living this right now?
I'll start, and thank you so much, Congressman Gonzalez and Congressman Bacon and Don Beyer. We're the 4 co-chairs of the Mental Health Caucus, and we all attended. And really what my big takeaway is that, first of all, youth who are in the mental health service system really understand what works and what doesn't work. And what some of the things that they were asking for were more telehealth, more digital services. Again, meet them where they are so that they can actually get help. We also heard a lot about providers not quite understanding how to meet them where they are. So if there's better training, and a lot of them had issues with the providers that were trying to help them, and they weren't quite meeting them where they were. The idea, and we talked a little bit about this in the green room, that someone could maybe start in high school with a telehealth mental health provider, but then go away to college, they lose that provider. That's a really big deal. I mean, it's not the same as a physical health provider. When you build a relationship with a therapist and then you go away to college and you lose that connection because of insurance, that doesn't make any sense to these kids, but they know it's real. And so that was something they definitely asked for.
What stood out to you?
Two takeaways. One, it was really sad. I mean, I wanted to go pet a dog afterwards. I mean, it was a really heavy, sad, important topic, but it was really heavy. It was the middle of the day. You're always coming and going, and I'm like, man, I'm glad we did it. Yeah. But I walked away going, I need therapy, right? Yeah. You know what I mean? It's just, it was a really heavy topic. That was one part of it. The other part of it, I'm an appropriator, so I view the lens through dollars and cents. When it comes to legislating, I like to say, show me how much you love me by how big the check is, right? Don't just talk about the problem, but also write the funds to it. I will say this, and we don't do this enough. We talk about the front end of bills, we talk about the sausage making of bills, but when the bill actually passes, when the bill actually becomes law, it's usually, oftentimes, much different from how it started. And we usually just talk about how it started. So I'm really proud as an appropriator for us to pass 11 out of the 12 appropriations bills. Well, in the LHHS bill, there was no cuts to SAMHSA. There was actually an increase. This is a positive thing, right? Yes, the administration wanted to come out and slash $1 billion on some of the mental health programs, but they came back the next day and said, wait a second, let's think this through a little bit. And Congress, which I argue is closest to the people, we worked in a bipartisan manner to go, wait a second here. These are the programs that are important to us. So to that aspect of it, I think our voices are working. We slashed other things in LHS, you know, refugee services and some of these other things. But I think to that point, we are in Congress. We are doing our role. The last thing I'd say this, and it really stuck out to me, was I used one of my community projects for a new mental health facility in Uvalde a couple years ago.
I was going to just ask you about that.
Okay, it was a few $1 million. If every member of Congress did this, just one mental health facility in their community, we would have $1 billion towards this.
So talk about that, because you focus a lot on school safety, funding in your district. You know, the aftermath of the Uvalde school shooting obviously has massive impact on youth and going to school and feeling safe. And what have you kind of seen in your own community with that?
I grew up not too far from Uvalde, a small little town, 500 people, probably about 40 minutes from Uvalde. So to me, Uvalde was always the big town, right? Uvalde's about 15,000 people. What that community has gone through has been very, very difficult. And it's something that's gonna be happening for a very long time. You see this in all these communities, Parkland and all these places, Colorado and in the East Coast. You see this happening in a weird way. Like, we were gonna be struggling for a long time, and we're constantly re-victimized, constantly, for all these different reasons, some good, some bad. We're constantly re-victimized. But in a weird way, so many of these kids that no one cared about, or I won't say cared about, no one paid attention to, all of a sudden have all these different opportunities that they otherwise would never have. And I've seen so many kids from Uvalde come through my office that are gonna go out and do something and be somebody. These opportunities that have arisen, but it is a difficult situation. And what I don't want other communities to go through that ever. In any form or fashion. I'd much rather for us to get on the front end of it. Like you were mentioning, let's not wait till they get to the emergency room. Right. Let's not wait until it's catastrophic. Let's get to the forefront of it to save some of these places.
I want to dig a little bit deeper, Congresswoman Salinas, about some of the things that you've been championing. Building capacity for CARE Act, you were talking about a little bit. You also have a focus on Mental Health Services for Student Act, which has previously passed the House on a bipartisan basis. What kind of impact can you talk about that those policies could have?
Well, again, this is, I think, what we heard from the students, is meeting them where they are and meeting them in schools and giving schools the actual infrastructure, and whether it's data or providers in schools, to help on that prevention end, to identify kids who maybe are already at risk or are having mental health issues, that we have the capacity to actually address their needs. And we know that schools are a great place to identify where those problems happen, but educators don't actually have the tools or the wherewithal or the knowledge, the training to know how to deal with it. And so that is what some of this, this legislation and this funding could do. And that would provide a $300 million grant to schools across the country. And that could essentially give, school districts across our country those tools to be able to address kids' needs right now.
All right, I have so many more questions we did not get to, but we are almost out of time. But before I let you go, sometimes when we engage in topics like this, you talked about just, it can feel very overwhelming, or seem insurmountable. How can we kind of create cultural and social change? Those are really big things. But I want to end on something hopeful. What gives you hope in this space that makes you want to keep this fight going, makes you want to stay as co-chairs? I'll start with you, and then we'll give you last word.
I mean, the fact that we've got a full crowd, the fact that all these things happening in our country that are very important topics, and we're talking about mental health this morning, I think we also need to remind each other, we need to take care of ourselves, and we need to take care of our friends, our family, our loved ones. When I was in the military, I'd always say, hey, no one's gonna look out for you more than yourself and the person next to you. So let's remind ourselves, it's not just our youth, it's all of us. We all need to take a minute and go, wait a second, am I okay? And it's okay to put your phone down. It's okay to go, maybe I need some time. I guess the young kids call it touch grass, right? Maybe I need to put my phone down and go touch grass for a little bit. Go for a walk, go to the park, go whatever it is, go to a movie, whatever it is. that's the thing that I think gives me a lot of hope. Is like, hey, all these people want to be engaged.
Congresswoman.
And for me, it is really the youth that come into my office, the roundtables that I have. These Gen Z kicks ass. I'm just like, they are so on top of it. They know how to have conversations. They know how to engage in difficult conversations. Stigma feels like it's starting to melt away more so than in my generation.
Yes, sure.
When my sister was 16 and she attempted suicide, we did not have a peer support team on the ground in the schools. Kids are asking for this. They're asking for what they need and advocating for themselves in a way I have never seen, and it gives me hope because I know if this comes from those who are experiencing it, those who have friends and loved ones, they're gonna fight like hell to make sure we do the right thing.
All right, we are going to leave it there. Thank you both so much. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. It was great.
Thank you.
All right, we'll be back in just a minute with our fireside chat. All right, we are back. I want to welcome former Representative Carlos Curbelo and to the chair here. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right. So we knew you, I knew you first when you were in Congress, but now you are chair of the Coalition to Empower Our Future. We're going to do a fireside chat. Thank you so much. But first, maybe and foremost, I think you can ground us this conversation. Tell us why the coalition was formed and how you all approach mental health.
Yeah, so Anna, this is an issue that has found me over and over throughout the years. First as a school board member in Miami-Dade County, visit a lot of schools and eventually figured out that a lot of the challenges that teachers and principals and others were having led us back to this topic of mental health. Then when I served in Congress, you remember we had the Pulse nightclub shooting in Florida, big massacre in Las Vegas, and this topic just kept coming up. We would try to come up with simple solutions to all this, like no fly, no buy, and really kind of miss the big picture. And now I have a 16-year-old and 13-year-old daughters, so it's an intense time in our household, and we think about mental health a lot because it's just a daily challenge. The coalition, and the reason I was so attracted to it, and why when I was approached about it, I was so enthusiastic to get involved, really does force us and encourage us to zoom out and to say, okay, especially here in DC or even in local communities, governments always want to find that silver bullet. Oh, we have this problem. Where's the solution? Okay, here it is. This is the one solution, and now we're done. We can check the box and we can move on.
Yep.
Well, this issue, that will never work. And the coalition has really become a great convener to bring experts together, to bring young people, parents, clinicians, educators together, convene a national conversation, and try to figure out every single angle that is available to us to approach this issue, to address this issue, and then hopefully one day we can say, yes, we have come up with an agenda that can actually help us make substantial progress on this front.
Yeah, I want to dig into that a little bit. You guys really favor a big tent approach, I would say, right? I mean, it includes parents, experts, leaders in education. Sometimes when you're in Washington, it can just be all experts talking to each other or lawmakers talking to each other. We heard certainly from the congresswomen and congressmen that the youth actually that they've heard from have a lot of ideas here. Why do you think this kind of is more favorable than maybe a more targeted approach that is kind of less kind of taking all aspects into maybe what is the solution?
Yeah, look, there are issues where a targeted approach makes the most sense. Here, every child is unique. I mean, just in my household, I have a 16-year-old, 13-year-old. They're both girls, but their needs and their challenges and their frustrations and their talents are completely different. So if we try to adopt a targeted approach, we're going to leave a lot of people out. And this affects young people across the spectrum. Children who live in poverty, children who live in wealth. I mean, this issue does not discriminate. So that's why it's so important to convene everyone, to listen to everyone, especially on it, of people who are on the front lines. The experts are great. The people who have written books are important. But those who are dealing with 10, 11, 12 kids every day in their offices, counselors, right? Psychologists, those are the people. We had a convening in Miami a few months ago, and those are the people I learned the most from.
Well, I want to dial in on that a little bit. So you've talked about how you're a father, you've got two children. What role do you think parents should play when it comes to youth mental health? And do they need more support? Do they have the tools in the toolbox to handle some of the challenges, as you say?
This is, I think, one of the elements of this that's the most overlooked. Just thinking back to my own experience, my parents were exiles, refugees. They were about 40 years older than I am. I remember I was in school, and they didn't really know exactly what was going on because the culture was different. There were some language barriers. I imagine a kid like me today with parents that are immigrants that are 40 years older than that child. I think it's an entirely foreign world. So we need to empower parents to understand the challenges that young people are having, to understand the opportunities and risks associated with technology, right? I mean, I think a lot of parents get frustrated and say, well, we're just, no phones at all. You can't have a phone. We've tried that. It's a great punishment because it really hurts, right? And you get the
I'd
kids,
like someone to take my phone away from me. That might be a benefit.
You get the kids' attention, but then you end up realizing that sometimes you're only isolating them further because the girls sometimes say, I don't even know what's going on. There was an event and my friends tried to invite me and I couldn't go. So what I thought was a good punishment now has made the situation worse for my kids. So I really do think we need to empower parents to figure out how to relate to their kids better. Maybe instead of yelling at them and telling them to put the phone away, like invite them to go bake with you or to go outside for a walk, right? These are little things, but across an entire country, they make a big difference, right? So this issue of maybe taking the focus a little bit off the children and the young people and putting it on the parents, I think that could pay big dividends.
And giving them the tools, right? Which is kind of what you're talking about, how to actually kind of manage these situations towards a better result. There has been a ton of news about technology, devices, and getting a lot of blame right now. What's your perspective in terms of, is there a hard and fast rule, or is it on a case-by-case basis?
Yeah, look, everyone likes a good scapegoat, especially in Washington, D.C., right? Who's the monster that we can attack today and blame for everything? And I think it'd be foolish to blame technology for the challenges that young people are facing. And we just know intuitively there's so many factors, right? We know that affordability, for example, is a big challenge in our country for a lot of families. We have families doing very well, right? This K-shaped economy that people are talking about. So people who are financially stressed, that puts a big burden on kids. We know that bullying has really gotten a lot of attention over the last 10, 15 years in schools. We need to make a lot of progress on that front. We know that kids have been, especially since the pandemic, have been increasingly isolated, right? And that is a major factor as well. So again, we could be cute about this issue. We could try to score some cheap points and say, well, we're going to punish this group of people or punish these companies, and now all of a sudden everything's going to be better for young people. It's just not going to work, right? So that's why we're encouraging everyone to sit at the table, to come up with their ideas, their solutions. And we understand that every factor is important. Mm-hmm. And yes, I can tell you as a dad, young people need to spend more time interacting face to face and being out in nature and running around. Yes, that's important, but there are so many other factors as well. So we need to figure out how to empower kids and parents to manage technology better in their lives. I don't think, some of these more punitive ideas are actually going to solve the problem.
So we're quickly running out of time, but I want to ask about what strategies or solutions maybe are coming up over and over in these conversations, from your conversations in Miami, your conversations here in Washington. Are there things that you think either Washington needs to be doing more of, or that, hey, this is kind of a trend line that we're seeing that's working?
Look, we have a partner, After School All-Stars, and I think paying attention to that gap, what kids are doing from the time they leave school to the time where the family is reunited in the home, maybe for dinner. That's a gap that I think needs to be addressed. And there are wonderful organizations, partners like After School All-Stars and others, YMCA. There are many programs, but perhaps it would make sense to make greater investments in those programs. And I see this at home. I mean, when the girls have after-school activities, it's great because they're out and they're doing things. And then they get home and we eat, and it's just kind of like a normal day. But when they don't have activities, sometimes we're at home and we're like, this kid's been in her room with a door closed for 2-3 hours, and you just know that's not good, right? So I really do think, for example, investing in that gap between after school and when the family's reunited could make a big impact. But again, that's just one example of many, many, many solutions that we have to bring together in the form of a comprehensive agenda to tackle this issue.
All right, before I let you go, what's the one thing you hope people in person and on the live stream take away from our conversation today?
Just kind of reiterate this point. If we really want to solve this, if we want to be serious about it, it cannot be a check-the-box exercise. It cannot be, well, we're going to throw $1 billion at this, and now we can tell our constituents that we have solved mental health. No, it can't be, well, we're going to restrict or punish this kind of technology or this kind of company. That's not going to yield any big results either. We need to be sober about this, which is a challenge in Washington, D.C. There's not a lot of sobriety here often, but if there's one issue where policymakers can really come together, you know this because you all cover it every day, every issue's become politicized.
Yeah.
This issue should be an exception. There would be no better exception than this issue. And I really encourage not just my former colleagues on the Hill and all the stakeholders here in Washington, D.C., but the entire country and anyone who cares about young people, which should be everyone in our country. Really, let's commit to this idea of coming together, bringing all of the challenges and solutions to the table, and trying to build an agenda that's really going to make a difference for young people in America.
All right, Congressman, we're going to leave it there. Thank you so much. Really appreciate it.
Great to be with you.
All right, my colleague Dave Clark will be back with the expert panel in just a minute. Please come sit down. There's some chairs here if you want to take a seat. Thank you.
Please welcome Punchbowl News Policy Editor Dave Clark.
Well, thank you everyone for being here. I like the big voice of God intro. It's like, never did make it to professional sports. So, well, thanks for being here for this important conversation. We're going to have our expert panel now talk about these important issues. So I'm going to call to the stage Nicole Owings-Fauner, please come up, who's the director of the American Academy of Pediatrics Center of Excellence on Social Media and Youth Mental Health. So hard to get on a business card, but a good title. And then Ed Foster-Simeon, who is president and CEO of the U.S. Soccer Foundation, and Jody Grant, executive director of the After School Alliance. All right, thanks everybody. So I thought we might just start by taking a little bit of a step back and talking about what is different today for kids than for their parents? What are the big issues facing them that are making this mental health crisis so hard for them? What are the issues that they're facing that say their parents didn't? We'll start here with you.
Sure, thanks. I think some of it's been touched on in earlier conversations. But really, it's just a lot of pressure on young people. It's really wonderful that they have all of these opportunities to connect and to be online in interesting ways, to be creative. But there's really a lot of pressure then to be on and to be visible. They see what's going on in the world today. As we were growing up, you might not have known exactly what was happening in another part of the country when it was happening. And now it's very much in your face, right? And adults are feeling stress. Adults are feeling pressure. Adults may not have all of the solutions. They may not be coming to them with the conversations when kids need it. And so I think a lot of that really can add to an already tough environment. And so I think the more that we are able to have those conversations and be honest and be proactive about that is really going to help with some of that stress.
Okay. Ed, how about you? What do you see on the ground in dealing with kids?
I have to admit that I'm glad I'm not a kid growing up today because, when I was a kid, there wasn't a recording of everything that I did or every mistake that I made. You talk about pressure, it's not only the things that they see, but it's the environment that they're in. Something happens at school, it's not just happened at your school, now it's on social media and it's all over the place. So young people are under a tremendous amount of pressure just by the environment that they're in. And, and the statistics bear that out in terms of, more than 40% feel hopelessness and sadness on a persistent basis. That's not good. You get one shot at childhood, one, and we have to find ways to bring joy and happiness back into childhood, and getting kids active and connected with their friends and peers in the community is one way to do that.
Jody?
So, I agree with everything that's been said, and I also think that, COVID played into all of this as well. So for so many of our kids, there's a sense of isolation, and they really need a place where they can belong, where they can have healthy interactions with other students, with caring adults, feel seen, feel heard. And I think, I'm jumping ahead, but I think that's so important that we're having this panel and that we're talking about this, because I think for so many of our kids, that is part of the antidote to what's going on in this crazy, ever-changing world around them with AI and everything else, to have that safe place where they feel like they make a difference and they belong.
Do you still see the effects of the pandemic? I mean, is it on kids who are not, maybe who are younger before the pandemic? I mean, is it sort of just hitting a group of kids who are in a certain age range, or is it one of the tales of that?
We still see that. I think we're going to see it for a long time, and I think some of that is this sense of isolation. Some of it is, we talk about kids being academically behind, but when we talk to parents, it was socially behind that they were worried about. I can say that when we talk to our youth, and I'm so glad we're talking about Youth Voice, they tell us that, after school programs, which you're hearing a lot about, which makes me very happy, that mental health is one of the reasons they go, that is the place where they feel like they're getting those positive relationships. So yeah, I think as an adult, I'm still recovering from it, right? Our whole workplace has changed in how we do things.
Yeah. So I want to talk to each of you about sort of your specific areas, and starting with you, Nicole. Obviously, your group takes a kind of approach to social media that's not just ban it, don't have your kids using it. I was going through your website, and as a father, I was going through the 5 C's and kind of like, what am I doing? Yeah, that's right. Oh, God, why am I letting watch that and not this? But tell us a little bit about why your group takes that approach and what the research that you're doing or you've seen shows about how kids should be, what's the best way for them to interact with social media, because it's not going anywhere and technology is not going to slow down.
Yeah, I think that's a great question. And as you know, there's lots in the media about how technology is bad and we're putting bans and restrictions on it. But we want to make sure that we're also listening to youth about what their experience is. And so their experience is very much that there is a risk, but it's also, they use it as a resource. The online space is a place where they go to connect, where they can be creative, where they can find information about mental health and other issues that they're facing. But at the same time, more than half of teens are telling us that they're spending too much time on it and they want to find ways to cut back. And so it's really important as adults that we listen to that and help provide solutions in that way. And so when we move away from just speaking about it in a fear-based way that really causes anxiety for families, nobody wants to talk about something they feel guilty about, right? My kid is using too much of different screens or media. And so we want to get them to a place where we're ready to brainstorm solutions and talk about moving forward and what we can do. And so we want to make sure in everything that we're doing that we're explaining to parents how to have conversations with your kid, how to feel prepared and not feel anxious about that. And so you referenced the 5 C's, and so that's one way that we're working with different professionals and parents to understand what is going on developmentally at different stages, to understand how that might interact with media, and just to know what are healthy habits to strive for at home. And one of those biggest things that we talk to parents about, and I've said a couple times now, is conversation. Because conversation is a protective factor for youth around lots of topics, not just social media. And so making sure that parents feel prepared to have those conversations on a regular basis, not simply when your child has done something wrong or broken a limit, but really engaging genuinely and asking them about what their experience is on social media, learning how to use different platforms together. It's okay to not know, you just have to be curious and take the time to learn together.
Okay.
I think those are the big things I would emphasize.
We are here in Washington. I know some of the reporters I work for there, they cover a lot of legislation about like social media design. What's your group's view on something Congress could do, if anything, about something like social media design, kind of endless scrolling? I mean, is there a role to play there when it comes to social media?
Yeah, so I will say as a federally funded center, we don't advocate for any specific laws or policy, but we do talk about what would be based in the evidence, what would be in children's best interest. And so some of those are, yes, age-appropriate design that takes away some of those endless scroll, or it makes it hard to disengage. We really want children to have privacy, to not have their data be used in manipulative ways, that type of thing. And then really thinking about if you do take away some of these access of the things that they use to connect, what are you replacing that with? Where are the third spaces? How are they connecting? How are they finding important information that they need? How are they taking brain breaks in school if it's not on devices? And so really making sure that it's not simply removing something, but you're also reinforcing those needs that they have.
Okay, interesting. Ed, we talked a lot about things that are different, but one thing that's not different for kids is sports, right? Everyone's played sports for a long time. It helps them get exercise, build self-esteem, work with other kids. What is the role of sports today, given some of the challenges you outlined that people are facing? Is it different? Is it just sort of reinforcing that?
No, I think that youth sports is underestimated for its value in society. A lot of times we think of it as just fun and games or who won a trophy, but it's actually a convening of young people, and it's an opportunity for them to learn and grow in a fun environment with their peers. Kids are playing sports, but they're learning teamwork, they're learning perseverance, they're learning grit, they're learning all these things that when they go to work one day, these are the exact skill sets that they're going to need. And it's another way to get kids from in front of phones and from in front of screens and active and engaged in their communities. And I will say this, because one of the things that we have learned, we work with under-resourced communities, children who don't have a lot of resources around them, and we use soccer as a vehicle to help lift them up. And, you know, we talked about the loneliness and hopelessness, and we have found in the evidence that we've collected that 81% of participants feel better about their future by after being engaged with this programming. So just being active and with your peers, having fun, having a safe space where you can just be, you know, without pressure of, any kind of pressure, just playing and having fun with your friends. And that's where we see the power is and there's also a really important value that I can't emphasize enough around the power of youth coaches. Youth coaches are among the most influential people in a child's life. And kids come to them because they want to learn from them and they have fun doing it. And what we have found is coaches, they want more training, more learning, more support to help them help the young people that they're engaged with, right? Less than 1% of kids are going to become paid professional athletes, but their engagement with sports should be helpful to them. And guess what? Coaches often will see things or hear things from kids that they won't tell a teacher, that they won't tell their parents, right? Something that's going on. And so we've designed a training, a coach mentor training to prepare coaches to meet children where they are, to understand the various issues that they're facing, and then to help them create those safe spaces in those environments that make kids feel welcome and want to come back and enjoy themselves.
Yeah, I imagine the coach training is a big deal because sports can be a pressure cooker for kids too, depending on the coach or the team, and et cetera. You focus on soccer. Are you guys going to be using the World Cup as a big way of trying to attract kids into your program? Or to get them
my
more?
goodness, the World Cup is,
I didn't know if you knew it was coming up.
Yeah, I heard.
Here to help.
We're actually in like a mega decade for sport in this country. You have the World Cup coming, you have the Olympics coming, and then in 2028, and then you have the likelihood, very strong likelihood, of the Women's World Cup coming to the United States in 2031. And to us, from our viewpoint, it would be a terrible thing to waste that opportunity to reimagine youth sports and to expand access so that all young people have access to sport and the opportunity to play. The way sport has evolved in this country is very much a pay-to-play model. If I have 4 kids, they're all adults now, I wrote a lot of checks for them to be able to participate, but not every family has that ability to do that. So our work is about making access to play and sport an easy choice, free or very, very, very low cost for kids to be able to participate, because the value is beyond fun and games. The value is about their mental health, their well-being, their health, all those things are what the value is. And so we are pushing very hard. We think about legacy. The U.S. Soccer Foundation is a legacy of the 1994 World Cup that was hosted here in the United States. We want the legacy of this World Cup to be increased access to sport for young people, not just soccer, but all sport, and more coaches who are trained and prepared to support young people in their development.
And Jody, we were talking a little bit upstairs about after-school programs and how difficult it can be when your 2 parents are working. What you do, what is the big role today in after-school programs, and I guess what more could be done to sort of help expand them, especially in underserved areas?
Yeah, thank you for that question, because kids spend 80% of their waking hours outside of school. And what we just heard about the amazing things that U.S. Soccer Foundation is doing, we want all kids to have access to that. And for some kids, it's sports. For some kids, it might be theater. It might be a robotics club. But this is where kids can get those developmental relationships that are the leading indicator of how they're going to succeed in life. But it's also a lifeline for our working parents. For so many parents, they rely on after-school programs so that they can keep their jobs. And they report to us that it's hundreds of billions of dollars in productivity that is saved for parents when they know their kids are safe, engaged, and happy. But the sad reality is we're just not doing enough. So we did a parent survey, 2025, and we found that there's 23 million students whose parents want them to be in after-school programs, but they don't have them. And so, we need to absolutely do more. We need to do more with federal policy. We need to do more with state policy. We need to do more locally, because so many of these programs are locally driven. We need to do more with philanthropy. And it's not a heavy lift. Most of these programs are not that expensive, especially because you have communities coming together to provide them, but they can make a huge difference. And I just wanted to bring it back because we are talking about mental health. So many of the things you're hearing about, even the McConaughey's, like they support 45 different after-school programs, because all of these things, again, they provide tools and resources to give kids the self-confidence and the skills to deal with the challenges that they're facing today.
So what's the biggest challenge to expanding after-school programs? Is it just money? Is it funding? Or are there other issues you're pushing on to try to avoid?
Yeah, the biggest challenge is money. So, when we did the survey of parents, we found that wealthier parents are paying 9 times as much for after-school activities than low-income parents. And that's not a surprise. Pay to play, all of these things cost money. And what we're also finding is for more and more middle-income families, this is a real barrier. So it's absolutely, a sense of more resources. Transportation is a big hurdle. And then also staffing. We need to treat our staff like professionals and make sure that they can make a living wage. One of the things we saw, especially during COVID, was that staff in our space are so committed to the kids, and they find it very rewarding. But if they're going to make $3 more an hour at Starbucks or McDonald's, it's hard to keep them. So, really thinking through how we can make these places, make staffing available to our kids as well as a sustainable career path.
Can I just jump
Sure
in
thing.
here? Because I think also policymakers beginning to think about after-school programming and sports in a different way, right? It is not just recreational. It's a way to deal with the challenges we're talking about at the scale that the problems exist, right? There are a lot of things that you can do that are, really intensive and quite, expensive, and they really drive major benefits for a small number of young people, right? And they're great, and we celebrate those. But when you're talking about the scale of the number of young people who need support and need help, thinking about after-school programming, thinking about sports as a tool, as a policy tool to help drive the kind of change that we want to see in this nation, and thinking about it differently, I think that's one of the barriers. I think it's still too often just thought about as who won a trophy or, fun and games. And it has much more potential than that.
Got it. We've talked a lot about a lot of issues here, but what's one issue that doesn't get discussed enough when it comes to the mental health challenges kids are facing? What's an issue you would highlight that doesn't necessarily get brought up in the news or just even in conversations in Washington and states? Start with you here.
Yeah, I think it depends on who's having those conversations, right? And so I think making sure that the adults in the young people's lives are equipped and prepared to support them. And so that can be through increased training to mental health providers, increased access to mental health providers, increased training to pediatricians, increased access to pediatricians and support. And then, as was mentioned, this access to third spaces and other ways. So we should be training coaches, and we should be training teachers and counselors, and really everyone has an investment in youth and preparing those folks to know how to talk about social media, to know how to talk about other topics in their lives. I think that will really go a long way, but sometimes we don't put enough effort into making those professionals and paraprofessionals ready.
Got it. Right. Ed?
Yeah, I think the loneliness and isolation is not talked about enough, that kids are really alone. And, finding ways to get them more engaged with their peers. One of the things that I have observed even in my own world, looking at social media, it can make you feel like everybody else is having this great, this great life, and you're not, right? And, getting kids engaged with other people, because when you talk to other people and you connect, you find out, oh, we're all kind of dealing with the same things. We're all struggling with this and that, right? And so I think recognizing the extent of the loneliness and the sadness that young people are feeling is really, 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 really important, that we recognize that and do more to get kids engaged with their peers, create more environments for them to associate, and put more caring adults in their lives who understand their role to play as a mentor to help kids and encourage them through difficulties that they're having in their lives.
Jody?
So I think we have heard a bit about this, but I think empowering our kids and listening to them, because I think that many of the solutions to this, they know what they are. And so it's really refreshing to hear that policymakers are talking to kids, because policymakers can play such a huge role in this. And like mental health, you know, after school is a very bipartisan issue because it's very locally based. But also empowering kids to be leaders in making some of the changes. So designing programs, having a say in what kind of activities they want to do, advising policymakers, I think that can go a long way, because, you know, I have to say, you know, a 15-year-old kid may have a much better idea of what they need than, you know, a parent of a 25-year-old sitting on a panel. So they're a very important voice in all of this.
I mean, we're talking about the type of kids, the people who support kids, specifically for parents though. How do you try to reach out to parents and try to educate them more about what they can do to help their kids, or what resources are available to them? I mean, that seems like that's a lot of what your group does. How do you try to get the parents involved in all of this so they know how to help their kids?
Yeah, so we are reaching parents where they are, so starting with the pediatrician's office, also through schools, providing different tools and resources that will then help them make small changes at home that make a really big difference. And so focusing on what's developmentally appropriate. We offer on our website, we have a question and answer portal. And so folks can go and ask any question you want about youth and mental health. And we work with our research team and our medical directors to develop evidence-based and practical solutions to those questions. So that's one way that we're connecting publicly. And then we work with a variety of different nonprofits and other associations to be meeting them there. So we work with the PTA, the National Education Association, working with schools, and really trying to train all of those people that we mentioned before on how to reach kids and families, so that it's not just on parents.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so one of the things that we launched an initiative called Yes Coach, which is really designed to encourage more parents and family members to step into that role as a volunteer youth coach. Because I think that people think that they're not prepared because they're not an expert athlete, or, you know, I didn't play soccer growing up, or I'm not an Olympic gold medalist, so I can't play that role of coach. And the role of youth coach is really about being a caring adult in a child's life, and creating a space for them to connect and grow. And so Yes Coach is about giving those families, those parents, and anyone who wants to volunteer to play that role, the kind of fundamental basic training that they would need to be comfortable and to understand where kids are coming from, some of the challenges they're facing, and to recognize when a kid may be having a challenging day or challenging moment, and know how to speak to them about that. Those kinds of things really matter, because I think for many of us, you can feel overwhelmed by the scale of the problem. What is it? What can I do? Well, you know, is there anything I can do? But the simple act of stepping up and volunteering in your community, you know, as a youth coach, you know, we're getting ready to celebrate the 250th anniversary of this nation, and civic engagement is a big part of our history, right? Being involved in our communities. And these are ways, being involved with after-school programs, being involved as a mentor, being involved in youth sports in your community. Those are all ways that we can contribute to addressing some of the challenges that young people face.
If I can just jump in, the federal funding for after-school 21st Century Community Learning Centers explicitly has provisions about reaching out to parents. And I want to say that whether it's, you know, after school, you know, soccer, that is a safer place for many parents to talk about their kids too. And as Ed said, it's a place where we often discover things that a student might need that you don't see during the school day. So it's a wonderful opportunity, whether it's pickup or shows or, you know, dinners, to really have educators who may or may not be teachers, they may be coaches, interact with parents and give them some of the skills, the feedback, and the training that will help them work with their kids.
Okay, we're running out of time, but one more question for all of you. For the people who are in the room or watching this or care about this issue, what's the one thing you would like them to take away from this day, from the interviews with the lawmakers, yourselves? What's one big takeaway? Just to say a parent should take from it.
Yeah, and I have 2 teenagers myself, and I think I've stressed this a lot, but conversations. Conversations, genuine interest, being there to support them, not just to lecture, not just when things go wrong, asking them to share what they're seeing online, share a meme with them, engage. That's a really great protective factor for youth. And you don't have to know everything about what they're using. Just be curious, have those conversations and be there.
Yeah, I'd encourage parents to think about their young people's sport engagement differently. A lot of times parents create a pressure situation for their children. What should be fun and should be fun in games becomes another performance anxiety situation for young people. And if parents can just step back for a minute and just recognize that just the act of their children running around and being with their peers and having fun is really good for them, right? You know, as I shared at the beginning, less than 1% of kids playing any sport are going to become a paid professional athlete. That's a fact. You know, so what is really the experience is about is the learning and the fun that the kids have, the healthy activity that they have, the opportunity to connect with other people, to learn and grow as individuals. And parents, if we can all just step back a bit and just, you know, enjoy watching our kids play and not turn it into another performance kind of anxiety metric of how hard did you work and all these things that we can put pressure on kids about.
Jody?
So I would say as parents too, try to help your kids find places where they belong, where they have a passion or they develop a passion for something, where they meet caring adults and other kids, peers that have the same passion and interests. And I think, you know, since we mentioned civics, I think one of the beautiful things about that is it gets rid of all the politics, right? Kids are on a soccer field, they're teammates. Like, we're not asking what their politics are, you know, red, blue, purple. If they're on a, you know, in a theater production, you're not asking any of that stuff. So I think it's a way to create community for our kids. And that's incredibly important, that sense of belonging and feeling like you're contributing to something bigger than yourself.
Mm-hmm.
All right, well, thanks to all 3 of you for sharing your expertise here, Nicole, Ed, Jody, and thanks to the Coalition to Empower Our Future for partnering with Punchbowl News on this event. And thanks for showing up here, and have a great day.
Thank you.